Virginia teacher gives a chilling account of critical race theory trickle-down effect. It's even worse than you thought, Mom. I'm Dr. Duke, she's Katie, and she's back. And this is the Dr. Duke Show. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Dr. Duke Show, the only program that keeps you educated on the craziness impacting K-12 classrooms and college campuses around the world. Hey, she's back. Everybody, there she is, the one, the only, Mama. Okay, our first story takes us to Virginia, where a veteran teacher discusses just how crazy schools are getting, with critical race theory being forced on teachers and kids in the classroom. This is really utterly unsurprising, Katie, but what I think is the big story here is how shameless this is. So what's the report tell us? It basically tells us a Virginia public school teacher who was forced to take these trainings. If they're doing this to teachers, if they're putting teachers through trainings where they have to condemn their own race, they have to condemn their own culture, they have to condemn their own religion, they have to condemn their own intellect, their own teaching degrees, if that's what's happening to teachers, it's got to make you wonder how much more is happening to kids in these classrooms that we don't hear about.
Well, and the way I look at it, too, is this specific teacher, her name is Monica Gill. She's an American history, government, and comparative politics teacher with 25 years of experience. So they are, at this point, we know that it's been happening in the schools that our teachers have been teaching the kids. And anyone who wants to be a new teacher, they've been indoctrinated into this. And now, if we have any semblance of hope, it's about to be lost, because if Monica Gill, who's got 25 years experience, is being told, hey, by the way, now it's not just enough for you to, teach civics or teach government the way this republic was made. Now you need to do all this critical race theory. Do you think as a 25-year teacher you're going to stick around much longer? Like, no. 25 years in, at this point, bye-bye.
Nope, she's got that cushy retirement to look forward to. But that's the thing. Things like all this new pedagogical revolution we've seen, from No Child Left Behind to Common Core to this, they want to get rid of these teachers. They make too much money, and they grew up, number one, and number two, they were educated in an era where you didn't have this creepy sort of quasi-Soviet indoctrination methodology. So these are the ones that have to go. She knows, Monica Gill, what it was like before this happened. She knows what school teaching was like before the feds took over. All these, I hate to say it, these asinine 4-year graduates with their stupid, worthless education degrees, this is all they know. All they know is that their job is to socially mold kids. And let me throw it this way to you, Mom and Dad. Think about the typical college education degree, and Cato backed me up on this. She went through it. About half the coursework, or more, is the same multicultural nonsense. Why Western culture sucks, why non-Western culture is perfect. It forces you to despise Christianity, Western culture, the founding fathers, freedom, capitalism, free markets. So when these kids graduate now from these education departments, and then they end up teaching in your public schools, all they know how to do is do that to your kids. Is that fair to say?
That's absolutely fair to say. And that's the thing, is they are becoming experts, and so they feel entitled and so superior to you being experts, but they're experts in completely the wrong things. They're not teaching students to think for themselves. They're just teaching them what they've been indoctrinated with, and it just keeps going from person to person.
And from our classes together, when you were an education major, how many of them can even read? I mean, the idea that English
words are rough.
Education majors, they can't read, they can't write very well. I've watched.
Can't write good.
They can't. The math people.
Ungood.
The math people ain't go good. The math people ain't any good at figuring, at ciphering. So they don't do any of that stuff. All they get is the theory. So they're look, when they had to teach math and English, there was a certain humility, right?
Oh, yeah.
Because they weren't really well prepared. And they were only 1 or 2 steps ahead of their middle schoolers. Now, they have this, as you pointed out, this such arrogance. Their job there is to tell your kids why you as parents are bigots, why they're bigots, why their skin color makes them bigots. You're really grooming here. This is the perfect petri dish, the education degree, because, again, it's no content, all ideology. It's the perfect petri dish for growing little Soviets.
Growing little Soviets.
Little Soviets.
Let's just go back to a time when the Soviets
in the educational agar. Is that what it's called?
Sure.
Isn't that the stuff you spread? I think that's the gel you spread in the Petri dish to neutrify the bacteria.
I don't know no science.
You ain't got no cipher in science in you?
But back to the story specific. So Gil gave an example of like what is being taught to them that they're supposed to then teach on. And so she described a specific training exercise, okay, which a Vogue cover photo. So, there's Vogue. Look at it. Oh, look at it. It's so nice.
Dr. Seuss and Shakespeare, no room for them in the classroom. But Vogue, there you go.
Vogue, we can be teaching about. So there you see it. You have LeBron James, and then you have the model Giselle, right? She's the one married to Tom Brady.
She is.
Right? Okay. I don't really keep up on that. But anyway, I didn't even know she was a model. So there's LeBron James and model Giselle. So they have their arms around each other, as you can see, and she's smiling, and he's looking like, he's yelling like, ah, I'm dribbling the basketball. I'm so tough. Well, Gil was told that she and her colleagues, they were asked, what do you see? So, Dr. Duke, what do you see?
Well, can I preface this by saying, is there a more liberal magazine anywhere in the world than Vogue? And the answer is, trick question, Teen Vogue.
I was just going to...
Right? Teen Vogue. So this is one of the most left-wing publications. If you look at the image again, so what you see there is...
What do you see?
What I see there is virtue signaling, right? I see virtue signaling. I see you can't watch TV now. If you were to fly in from Mars and watch TV for the last 6 months, you would think every single marriage in this country was cross-racial. You would think that every single just watch commercials.
Just commercials. Just watch commercials. We should do a whole episode on just watching commercials.
Oh, that would be big. Apparently white people never marry each other. Chinese people, Asian people never marry each other. Blacks never.
They're just all partners as well. There's no marriage.
Oh, and there's no marriage.
There's
They're
a lot
just
of
partners.
Things. We'll have a whole episode coming up.
That's a good idea. Go back to the picture. So there you got it, right? You've got the image for Vogue of the new perfect femininity and the new perfect masculinity. Of course, for a publication this incredibly left-wing, though, what did they turn this into?
Well, the trainers, as they were called, said that seeing these two people is an example of subconscious implicit bias. Because what you should have seen, not what you actually do see, but what you should have seen was a modern day depiction of King Kong and his female victim.
Right. So you've got a billionaire basketball player and a billionaire wife of a billionaire football player.
And she's a female victim.
Right,
Yes.
and she's a female victim. So let's take a look at Kong and Fay Ray. So there you've got LeBron James with his mouth open. You could see there him screaming. And to the left-wing social justice race-baiting teachers, the ones who are training your teachers, that is not what that looks like. That is not two of the most entitled, privileged people in the world today. Those are not two of what's higher than the 1%. These are half percenters, guys. These are the half percenters. And because they're together on that image, and she's doing what she's doing, supermodeling, and he does what he does to get billions of dollars, dribbling a basketball, now you're supposed to see Fay Ray and King Kong.
So in summation, critical race theory and what our teachers, especially even now the veteran teachers, are being told and saying that you must teach to them is that LeBron James is a black man
monkey
portrayed as an aggressive ape.
Yep. Now, again, the teachers didn't think this. The trainers, the people who are woker than woke, the ones whose job it is to show you how racist you are, what do they see when they look at that picture? They see a big gorilla and an innocent little white woman.
So when you have dumb critical race theory being taught in our schools, what's an option, Mom and Dad? What can you do to escape it? Simple answer, homeschool. So what we're going to talk about in this segment is all the data that has been coming out little by little, proving the point that homeschooling is a good option over the past year because of COVID. And then in the next segment, we're actually going to talk about, moving ahead as hopefully, maybe not even hopefully, but as these schools do start to finally open. So statistics have been released. The Census Bureau actually came out with some statistics about homeschooling, and they found that 11.1% of K-12 students are homeschooled. More than 1 in 10, which that's insane if you would have asked this 10 years ago. In spring of 2020, so that's when, everything went on lockdown, it had been at 5.4%. So we're doubling the amount of students being homeschooled. And prior to that, it was only 3.3%. So 3 out of 10 kids.
Yeah, we got to be careful. I mean, when the public school said you can't come, how many moms just decided that whatever they were doing was homeschooling?
That's true.
You know, that there is that. I mean, we got to ask ourselves legitimate. We needed another year.
Okay.
If indeed the public schools open in the fall, let's see how many of those so-called homeschool moms rush back to the public schools. But I mean, you know.
Yeah, and that's the discussion I think we're going to have is what you think about it and what I think and where we see this going.
You'd like to think that on top of most moms and dads realize that their kids were not getting a rigorous education. I think because of what's happened with COVID and the lockdown. I mean, we've got a story, I believe it's later in this week, right? Or is it? I think it's later in the week, where they're already, some public school districts are already saying, don't guarantee we're going to be in the fall. That we may not be ready, COVID may not be done. We're not going to commit right now, here and now, to being there for your kids in the fall. I think what moms and dads figured out is how venal and selfish and self-serving the public school teachers are.
And we'll, yes, this is true. And we'll see, moving ahead in today's show, where we actually see it going specifically. But for now, let's get some statistics out of the way so we understand what we're talking about. So we have Casey Eggleston and Jason Fields of the Census Bureau, and they actually said the global COVID-19 pandemic has sparked new interest in homeschooling, and the appeal of alternative school arrangements has suddenly exploded. And they gathered all this data that they got from an experimental household public survey, and it measured the social and economic impacts during the coronavirus pandemic. So these are the guys who were able to find all the statistics. And now, just to note, the survey did distinguish between those who were truly homeschooling, and again, as you kind of pointed out, what does truly homeschooling even mean?
We do a homeschool here at Freedom Project, and I'm not even sure our parents can differentiate those yet.
That's why they have us.
That's exactly right.
Come on,
it's amazing.
Freedom Project.
I still think that if a lot of moms, if the kid's at home, it's homeschooling. And so, again, I hope that there's no doubt that the numbers are going to be bigger than ever before. But if that's true, if we get anywhere near 1 in 10, and I think we're close to that, that's a significant jump forward. It really is. And what's going to happen here is sooner or later, as that number grows, the next thing the public schools are going to do is not improve, is not repent, is to attack homeschooling. But you do got some. How about this? More data from a Gallup poll from around August 5th, which is pretty late in the day, from August. From August.
Yeah.
Yeah. Of last year?
This last August. Yeah. So there were various polls and various things that have been done.
I gotcha. So in August, about 9 months ago, they found a 5-point increase in those who said they'd homeschool. That went to 10% in November. Education Week reported a doubling of homeschool, and 58% of principals and superintendents naming homeschool as, quote, a major contributor to enrollment declines caused by COVID-19, more than any other single reason, and that's a good thing. For the principals and the superintendents to admit that, they're only admitting that because they've got a battleship about to fire, right? They're calling in the battleships to the Straits of Hormuz, and they're going to start carpet bombing homeschool, but that's what's coming next, yep.
And so you see, we have the amount of parents homeschooling has supposedly doubled or more since right before COVID. And then you're getting principals on high alert that, it's happening, or they're claiming that that's the reason. And then you have, even in April, they found that 52% of parents had a more favorable opinion of homeschool. This was back when COVID first hit, April 2020. We're a full year later, and now it's increased pretty much every month. And up until February, they did another one. They found it was 63% of parents are finding, hey, homeschooling, maybe they're not doing it, but they're at least
open-minded. And don't forget for the first 9 months of the COVID problem, how they were discouraging kids from homeschooling. They were lecturing parents that you can't do that. You're not allowed to do that. You could only do our Zoom courses online.
Yep. And now here's where the public schools are really going to get you.
Yep.
They are finding that Black families have had a large surge in homeschooling. Oh, we can't have that, right?
Well,
so it's gone from 3.3% in spring of 2020 to 16.1% in the fall of 2020. So that's an overrepresentation
isn't it interesting, Katie?
of what's in the public schools for families who are Black.
Isn't it interesting that COVID blew a great big hole in the plantation fence
I'm sorry,
for Blacks?
a black hole?
Did I say that?
No.
No?
I put that
well,
one
it's
there.
true.
That's what I'm saying.
A big black hole was opened on the fence at the Democrat educational plantation, and all the slaves ran to homeschooling. In fact, you know how we know this? Take a look at this story. Public school kindergarten enrollment is plummeting. Not only is the homeschool rising exponentially, but kindergarten enrollment is low.
But Dr. Duke, the kids are supposed to be already like, I should have popped out my daughter and then sent her off to school.
Who's going to teach 5-year-olds that their gender doesn't conform with their bodies?
I'm already a failing mother.
If kids aren't enrolling in kindergarten, who's going to teach 5-year-olds that their gender and their penis don't match each other?
Well, you know what? New York City is doing their darndest, but they are the ones who are finding that these kids aren't coming. So they are going to find all the teachers, as we'll call them, to do just that. But they're the ones reporting that kindergarten applications for next school year, so 2021 to 2022. I can't believe we're already in the 2022s. And it's down 12%. Like that's
about the same amount that homeschooling went up.
How did that work?
The other caveat about this we should be wary of. We know over the last couple of years, people are fleeing New York City. They are fleeing
because of the fleas,
and they're fleeing the fleas of New York State. They're getting out, and it would make sense to me. Who is the prime demographic to leave? It would be young parents, right? Given the taxation, given the politics, given the crappy education. So you also wonder: is this 12% families that are transitioning to homeschooling or private school, or do they reflect more how many young families have bolted the state?
Well, and it's not only them. So they're finding 12%. That's just when they did the little specific example, but nationwide they said it's 9%. Yep. So it's everyone everywhere is kind of like, hopefully, we'd like to hope, waking up to the fact that your kids are not getting an education when you think they are getting an education. And if you want to look at, go to the good old Midwest there in Cincinnati. Overall, Ohio had reported they're down 10%, but Cincinnati's down 15% from a year ago. Is it the great state over Ohio, or is it just, Ohio?
It's another crappy state with a fake Republican governor. But
there you go.
Hey, the state that gave you John Kasich cannot be considered a serious state.
All right, so in the last segment, we got some data out there. What's actually happening with the amount of homeschooling going on in this nation and moving forward? Now, discuss a little bit about where do we think it's going to move. Say that public schools open back up again. Is homeschooling going to stay where it is? Is it going to increase? Carrie McDonald, who is the Senior Education Fellow at the Foundation for Economic Education, FEE. She was also the author of Unschooled, Raising Curious, Well-Educated Children Outside the Conventional Classroom. And she kind of weighed in on what's happening, and because obviously this is what she does, is she focuses on homeschooling and what the statistics are saying. She says that the real tragedy over this past year hasn't been that children aren't actually in school, but that lockdowns and other pandemic policies have disconnected them from their larger communities, activities, peers, and extended family, leading to rising incidences of youth depression, deteriorating childhood mental health, and poor physical health through juvenile weight gain from inactivity. Lifting the restrictive public health policies will improve children's well-being, whether or not they attend a conventional school. So that's one thing that she's kind of pointing out of, well, whether these, that public education is still there or not there, it's rather opening it up overall in the kids' mental health.
Yeah, and I think that is a good point. That the one thing we do know that vis-a-vis all the other ways to educate kids, public school attendance is dropping, and that's a good thing. I've said this many times in the Dr. Duke show before, and I know Katie has said the same thing. On the one hand, moms and dads are clamoring for the schools to be open, but when you see what they're doing in the schools, why? I mean, it's talk about frying pan to the fire. I mean, okay, fine, you get the schools open again. Fine, the masks go, kids can have recess lunch and drink their chocolate milk. But they're also going to get radical transgender ideology at the time they go to kindergarten. They're going to get an anti-American history curriculum. They're going to get just an endless range of critical race theory that makes them hate themselves, their country, their nation. This is what we want to get the schools back open for.
That's the debate. I know a lot of parents, and I obviously only have very, very young children who aren't going to school yet, but I know a lot of parents who are talking about that dilemma. It's on the one hand, you want, your kids get a good education, so obviously you should keep them home, but on the other hand, you want your sanity if you have, and send them to school, and they claim the socialization is usually the number one thing, which is complete. That thing's off the table now with technology. Anyway, Carrie McDonald, though, I think, brought up a good point. She says, I think over the past year, parents have certainly felt re-empowered to direct their children's education in ways that were, unimaginable before school closures and the pandemic response. Is that true?
Well, I think the Band-Aid was ripped off, and you saw that not only are the teachers angry, venal, selfish, the teachers' unions are a joke, all that money, every year that we give them raises through referendums, all money flushed down the teachers' union toilet, all that we knew. But we ripped the Band-Aid off, and what did we see? On top of everything, we now realize that they're not even trying to teach our kids. They're consumed with their own raises, they're consumed with their own safety, they're consumed with their retirement packages, they're consumed with critical race theory and making your kids hate themselves. They don't even care if your kids can read or write.
And as she makes the point that we've been making, now even if you're not a homeschool parent, even if your kids were doing virtual, you have the opportunity directly to see what is happening in your kids' classroom, and it's kind of opening their eyes. I think from my perspective, if homeschool is going to continue, it's going to have to not shift with teachers' unions and any of that type of stuff. We're going to have to get so businesses in a way allow then maybe one of the parents to stay home, work virtually, and then the students could attend schools like Freedom Project Academy where we do all the teaching. You just are there, mom and dad, to take care of what if the kid has some issues during the day with the class, getting in the classroom.
We are enrolling for the next few months at Freedom Project Academy, but I'll tell you this, we had the biggest opening day last Monday, and this Monday, we're 1 week in, we have way exceeded beyond our wildest dreams how many kids we've ever gotten in the first week. So if Freedom Project is something you're thinking about, you got to get in the next month or so. It's time now for some real education. This whole week on the Dr. Duke Show, we are doing Jonathan Swift's Gulliver's Travels. Now, why, you might ask? Back when we used to teach real books in schools, your kids probably would have been at some point exposed to at least part of Gulliver's Travels. It is a remarkable book, 18th century Jonathan Swift. It's all about a guy who realizes that unless you understand the mores, the attitudes, the beliefs, the religions of other people, it's hard for you to gauge your own moral compass. How do you know what's right if you don't have other examples that contradict or challenge what you believe? So the premise of Gulliver's Travels is beautiful. Gulliver leaves home. He sees the world. In fact, he sees places in the world that had never been discovered before. We are all probably moderately familiar with his first trip. There are 4 books, 4 trips. The first trip to the land of the Lilliputians, right? We all have images of this, of Gulliver being bolted down to the ground by these tiny little people. He turns out to be a giant among midgets. In the second book, not surprisingly, he is the midget in a country he discovers full of giants, right? And as Swift himself said, everything that you believe based on your perspective, which is exactly right. You believe what you believe based on what you have seen and what you have seen from others. It's a measurement game. And so this idea of perspective, and you see how brilliantly Swift is exploiting it. At one point, Gulliver the human is a tiny little thing compared to the Brobdingnagians. Then in another time, he's the giant, and this other race of human beings is pygmies. And some really wonderful contrasts are laid. So I want to share some of the wisdom of Gulliver's Travels with you. Here's our first quote. The tiny Lilliputians surmise that Gulliver's watch may be his god, because it is that which, he admits, he seldom does anything without consulting. Now that's kind of a neat quote. He's got this timepiece, and that watch is probably as big as a garage to the Lilliputians. But what does it say about us, us human animals in Western culture, that we consult our watches so often? You would think that our watch is our god, that time owns us. And you want to fast forward this to the contemporary world, where at cell phones, how often we have to connect with our cell phones. Yeah, if you were a Martian who flew down to Earth and you see how much time every day we were taking out phones, we were staring at screens while we're walking, while we're eating, while we're recreating, while we're in the company of friends, everything is that phone. Maybe the Lilliputians are right to point out from their perspective, that must be the god of human beings in that culture, because they spend more time on it, with it, and investigating it than anything else that they do all day. Maybe technology has become a god.
All right, just a quick reminder to please download our Freedom Project Media app. All you have to do is simply search Freedom Project in your app store. And of course, if you are a fan of this show, and you should be, please consider supporting the Patriot Club, and we're going to send you our signature tumbler. It's just our way of saying thank you very much. Now, all you have to do is visit patriotclub.us to sign up. That's patriotclub.us. And before we go, we're going to show some love to our Patriot Club members. I haven't gotten to do this in a while, so today I'm going to give a shout out to Dennis from Quincy, Florida. Dennis, thank you for supporting us.
They named a city in Florida after Quincy, Jack Klugman. Ba, 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 ba,
Wow, you go to Jack Klugman.
I know the theme song, baby.
I go way back to John Quincy Adams.
I don't know, the Klugsters. The Klugster. And that's going to be our show for today. For Freedom Project, I'm Dr. Duke. She has returned. And guess what? She's still Katie. Until next time, stay educated, my friends.